So we're going to go over this new Georgia bill that everybody's been talking about there, SB 202, and we're going to talk about it. So last week, pretty much, the Georgia state legislative bodies passed the SB 202, and it was dubbed the Election Integrity Act. This bill is an obvious reaction to the 2020 election irregularities, as Georgia's majority Republican legislative bodies is trying to tie up loose ends. Democrats, including Joe Biden, have stated that this bill is the new Jim Crow law that suppresses people's color of the right to vote. So we're going to break it down. We're going to get into it. I just want to talk about what it had on a global scale, on a major scale, whatnot. It tied into baseball. And this is kind of disgusting because Joe Biden...
Before you get into that, I want to reiterate this. Glenn Greenwald has been tweeting about this bill, not the Democrats lying about this bill, right? And we're going to get into that. But I want to say we're going to get attacked for this because... we are looking at the specific text in the bill, and the specific text in the bill absolutely contradicts everything the mainstream media has mostly been telling people about the bill, because they only generalize parts of it to say this is the new Jim Crow. It is not the new Jim Crow.
No.
Even progressives are saying this. It's the new Jim Crow. These Republicans are trying to suppress the black vote, the people of color vote. That's not exactly it. Do Republicans try to do that? Yes, they do. Oftentimes through redistricting, and also the suppression of the voter rolls. That happens sometimes, yes, but that's not all that it is, okay? And we have to look at both ends, both voter suppression through the long lines and closing of poll stations, but also what the other side of it is, which is the election manipulation, the actual, election system that is used and weaponized to actually discount votes in general across the board, specifically depending on which side you're on.
Yeah, and it's really disgusting because the Democrats definitely suppress votes in the primaries, and mostly they suppress the working class. And in LA, we saw a lot of Latino people just moved into provisional ballots unjustly when they should have had a vote that counted to never be counted ever again, because the working class people were standing behind Bernie Sanders and they suppressed that vote. You know what I'm saying? And also, too, as well, a lot of these protections that are in these new reforms are to protect the fact that they can't cluster it. They can't put in extra ballots that they can cheat on and whatnot and stuff like that. So they are trying to tie up loose ends. We have to look at election laws. Is the accessibility worth the lack of security? If we're breaking the chain of custody just to get more accessibility, it's no good, because then they're going to cheat against the people. And the Democrats have shown they do it in the primaries all the time. And then they swing around and try to get that same vote back from the general election, because you people out there are easily duped to think orange man bad. We got to settle for people like Joe Biden, because that form of barbarianism is better than Trump barbarianism. I blame Bernie Sanders more than anything right now at this point. What he's done is totally disgusting. But let's start off about the whole general kind of the macro right now and how this affects on a global scale. The way they are weaponizing, and this is disgusting right here. Joe Biden went on ESPN and he made some comments about moving the Major League Baseball All-Star Game out of Atlanta. Now, just the fact that he just said, let's move it out of there, also pay attention to the rhetoric and the lies he is spewing. And here's the thing. People don't know about elections. The Convo Couch, we know about elections, and we're going to explain to you the whole water thing, which has been the main talking point from Joe Biden, Stacey Abrams, and all these other dumb Democrats.
How dare they not give the water to people in line?
Yeah, they're stupid.
So I think we should move in that direction.
I'd like to switch gears quickly, Mr. President. Sports and politics cross paths sometimes. That's exactly what happened last week in Major League Baseball. Tony Clark is the executive director of the Major League Baseball Players Association. He said he would, quote, look forward to discussing moving the All-Star Game out of Atlanta because Georgia Governor Brian Kemp signed into law a bill passed by the Republican-led state legislature to overhaul how its state elections are run. So, Mr. President, what do you think about the possibility that baseball decides to move their All-Star Game out of Atlanta because of this political issue?
I think today's professional athletes are acting incredibly responsibly. I would strongly support them doing that. People look to them. They're leaders. Look at what's happened with the NBA as well. Look at what's happened across the board. The very people who are victimized the most are the people who are the leaders in these various sports. And it's just not right. This is Jim Crow on steroids, what they're doing in Georgia and 40 other states. What is it all about? Imagine passing a law saying you cannot provide water or food for someone standing in a line to vote. Can't do that? Come on. or you're going to close a polling place at 5 o'clock when working people just get off. This is all about keeping working folks and ordinary folks that I grew up with from being able to vote.
If they
Lies. By the way, Johnny, if you looked at the thumbs up, thumbs down, it was 2,000 thumbs up and 10,000 thumbs down. They've been ratioing this son of a bitch every single time he gets on a channel or something. What is it at now? Is it 2,000, 10,000 again? Just so you know, ladies and gentlemen, 2,000 up, 10,000 down. We said this the other day, and I said right off the bat, I'm like, listen, they're going to remove the dislike button because they don't want you to realize how bad Joe Biden is and how disliked he really is. I mean, look at that. That is terrible. And so he talked about moving the Major League Baseball All-Star game out of Atlanta. Mm-hmm. So they moved the Major League Baseball game out of Atlanta. Oh. And it's disgusting because the Atlanta Braves, whose organization was hosting it there in their field, had nothing to do with this bill. All the small business owners that they said, all the small business owners, they've been waiting for years to get this game there. We're coming out of the COVID. It's going to be open to like a lot of people come there. This is going to help this is going to help a lot of small business owners, all your little vendors, your hot dog vendors, everybody in the streets and stuff like that. All the small hotels, the big hotels. You know what I'm saying? It's going to help a bunch of people. It's going to bring a lot of money and resources to the town. So they pulled it. I mean, how is that justified, fam, for doing something like that? Can you help me out for 1 second here?
Well,
how does that justify? I mean, what is that?
It doesn't justify it. But what I am saying is that the whole point that that he rectified is this is the new Jim Crow. First of all, Biden was like instrumental in continuing the implementations of the actual Jim Crow back in the day. Yeah. 1, 2, he is lying. He is saying that people are being denied water at the line. That has been the consistent thing on the internet. Everybody has been saying that. That is not true, and we're going to explain exactly how that is not true.
So what happens is I went and looked at a bunch of articles. I started looking at the bill early on Sunday, Easter Day. I spent a nice little time outside with a cup of coffee looking at this bill because I've seen all these people say that this bill is a racist bill. This bill is terrible. It's keeping people from vote. But people, once again, they don't understand elections. And we can speak from our actual experiences from this bill. And fact check some of the major points out there. Now, this particular article from the Daily Signal had 6 of the most kind of claims out there that people like Joe Biden were using, Stacey Abrams were using, and we'll get into that. And we also have some personal experiences that we can explain how these things go down. If you go down to just number 1, restrictions on casting absentee ballots. This is something we talk about a lot. Oh, by the way, let's go over Stacey Abrams real quick. What she says. She says from the passage of SB 202, voter suppression bill, targeted at black and brown voters, to the arrest of a black legislator who was advocating for voting on the rights of her constituents. Today was a reminder of Georgia's dark past. We must fight for the future of our democracy. Okay, that person was arrested for banging on the governor's door as he was signing the bill. It was kind of like when we went to California and we were at the state capitol. Remember, they were in front of the door. You can't touch that door, go near that door, they will arrest you. It was the same type of Mountie police with the hats going on. I'm not justifying it, but that's what went on.
That's wrong. Yeah, people shouldn't be arrested for that. Yeah. But Stacey Abrams, remember, she's the Center for American Progress Democrat. Yes. She has been lying a lot about the election issues. She is a complete corporate Democrat. A lot of people in the beginning thought, oh, she sounds great, like blah, blah, blah. Well, she completely flip-flopped and, of course, became a full-on corporate Democrat. So
now, John, I put the link to the actual bill up, so if you do want to hunt something down in the bill at any time, you can just
I have some specific pictures I want to go over, but if you see anything beyond what I have, we can pull it up later.
And they're a little bit different. You actually brought some great, you put out some great points, and we're going to put this in. This is restrictions on casting absentee ballots. Now, I want to talk about this, ladies and gentlemen, because a lot of times, a lot of people think the longer you have for absentee ballots, the better. No, early voting, early counting could lead to early cheating. That was something that Raji Robb said. Early fraud, right? Early cheating, early fraud, because what's going on? You want to limit and restrict the amount of times that you can have these ballots out there and how long they're sitting around. If you have them out for an extended period of time, you can get more fugazi ballots out there. There's more areas and rooms to cheat. So what they tried to do is limit the time they can send out the ballots, the limited time the ballots can come back. All these restrictions to just kind of shorten the period, so therefore they don't have boxes of ballots just sitting around at all these places and stuff like that. So it says in a written statement, Biden said of the new law, it adds rigid restrictions on casting absentee ballots that will effectively deny the right to vote to countless voters. The term rigid restrictions is a matter for debate. So a ruling of true or false is difficult here. The law does require voter ID for individuals who are casting absentee ballots, which previously was not the case. A voter would need to provide driver's license number or another state identification number on the ballot form. Now remember, this is an absentee ballot, fam. They don't have to bring it there. They just have to put it on the form. The law also requires voters to request absentee ballots up to 11 days before the election. It was in its previous form. The law allowed voters to request ballots by the Friday before Election Day, which is kind of hard because by the time they get the ballot and they send it back, it's going to be way late. And that's why they were trying to extend the deadline for ballots to come in later, and that's what they were trying to do. The deadline is still before Election Day, but the new law allows voters to return applications for absentee ballots online through the Secretary of State's office, and they can go through that website. The earliest that a Georgia voter may request an application for an absentee ballot will be 77 days before the election, down from 180 days, according to the Georgia Public Broadcasting. Kemp, the governor, said that 96% of Georgia voters already have suitable voter ID, and the alternative identification would be provided at no charge to those who need it. Also, the fact that when you go through the Secretary of State's line, fam, you have to put on your ballot either your last four of your Social Security and your date of birth. You just got to put it on the ballot right there.
So they don't have to bring the physical ID to vote.
No.
This is
an
regarding
absentee
ballot.
ballot. You have to provide the information that it came from somebody.
Okay. I don't really have a huge problem with that. I mean, I'm not in favor of voter ID laws. I've always said that, maybe that's where we disagree. But in other countries where they have good elections, like elections that are completely verifiable and, the highest rating, they have to bring their ID. They have to bring all these things. In America, we have a system that's lax. We're like, oh, we want to provide everybody. Well, the problem with that is we don't have a fair election system that's easily verifiable and transparent. So unfortunately, because we don't have that, we need to have regulations. Now, if we all sat down and said, okay, if we put tracking on absentee ballots, then maybe you don't need an ID. If we actually kept in line with our voter roll and make sure that people it was correct, and it was fair and updated, and we didn't throw out both people of color, and we didn't bring in both people who are no longer there or who have moved or whatever. If we had a system that was transparent, we could do that. We wouldn't have to put more security. But because we don't have a system that does that, then having some sort of avoid the doubling of ballots, which happens because, like I said before, I was still getting ballots in Florida when I wasn't even there. And so that is something that happens, and that, of course, makes it easily ripe for election fraud. Not voter fraud, election fraud.
Yeah, and I want to point that out, fam, because that is the ultimate solution, the number one solution we need for absentee ballots. We need tracking. We need the proper tracking. That really helps the chain of custody, because when you break the chain of custody in elections, you don't know where that ballot goes. It gets out of sight, out of mind. It can go anywhere, do anything. It's just like when me and Johnny went to the process center. We were looking at their books, and I was like, look at this Shangat over here, Johnny. They don't even have the time. They don't have the truck. They don't have nothing. Oh, they got one piece of tape over here, and they'll match up that piece of tape over there. Yeah. I'm like, the guy can go anywhere, smoke a blunt, have some Carl's Jr., let the ballots do whatever he wants. And it was the chain of custody was so shitty. There's no security in that election. And that's something that has to be brought to the table. Okay. And when it comes to absentee ballot, I'm going to pass it over to Johnny real quick. The thing is that you used to have to request it, and you used to have to put your driver's license or your identification number on it. Now, what they did when they changed these laws unjustly, when it didn't go through the legislative bodies, they made it so you don't have to put any ID number on it and stuff like that. And you didn't have to request it. They just sent it out to everybody on the roll. So now you have ballots coming in. You don't even know. There's no security on them. Right. There was no chain of custody. There's no identification numbers. It's not trying to make it harder for people to vote. It's trying to make it harder for people to cheat. Johnny.
Fam, you bring up the voter ID thing because you think it's like a class thing, right? Like some poor people can't afford to have an ID, right?
Yeah, I mean, mostly everybody has an ID. Some poor people, it's an elderly, don't really have an updated ID. They don't know how to vote. If you're a homeless person or unhoused person and you live in your car and say you want to vote for somebody, you may not have all the proper documentation. So it does target a lot of working class, and of course working class people, a lot of people of color.
Yeah. Well, I like that he said that alternative identification will be provided at no charge to those who need it.
Exactly.
Right.
A solution to that. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why I'm not and it's like they don't even have to provide the physical thing if you have the number. And if you don't have the number, I hope he's being honest too about the process of it being free. And it should also be a simple process, right? Because like I said, if we had tracking for these ballots and we had a transparent system, we wouldn't need that. We wouldn't even need that. You could just put your name and it'd be fine.
Yeah.
But we don't have
tracking.
that right now.
That would eliminate a lot of things. If you had
Yeah.
tracking, you would know exactly where it's come from, when it was picked up, when it was delivered, and the chain of custody is there. And Kempta said 96% of the Georgia voters already have a suitable ID. Johnny down below in that same section, Stacey Abrams says about 200,000 voters. Right below that, if you see right there, she says 200,000 Georgians lack the appropriate ID under SB 202. Now, Georgia's population in 2020 was 4 million people. So he's saying about 150, 160,000 people don't have it. So their numbers are close to each other, the Republican and the Democrat going back and forth. And he is trying to find a way to provide people, because it's in the bill. They can go online through the Secretary of State. If they don't have an ID, they put their date of birth and the last four of their Social Security so they can match it up and they know what is what. So they are making it somewhat, they are providing. And let me just point something out, fam. Remember when I told you I went to North Georgia? Remember when we talked to Reverend Annie Chambers talking about white people in these north areas of Georgia? They're poor. There's a lot of white people who don't have the IDs too as well. It's not just attacking people of color. It's attacking poor people. Okay, and that's going to always happen when you put in certain restrictions. There are going to be some people who are left out. It's our job to make sure that these people can get accessibility to vote. That doesn't mean you remove the securities and let it be a floodgate open for people to cheat. And that's the way it was before. There was no security in the system when you didn't have to provide a number and you just send it out to everybody. So go ahead, fam.
And it's not for people to cheat. It's for organizations within the system to cheat. Because Sally and Johnny and Mark don't go out there to try to give Trump or Biden more votes. It's an institutional rigging that happens in every single election we've had for years now. We saw the most prevalent one, of course, is Bush versus Gore. We saw that. This happens all the time. We saw it with Bernie Sanders. We've seen this many times. This is nothing new, but it is the fact that it is not. I just want to verify, it is not people doing this. It is an institutional thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I just want to read this last paragraph and what the law states. In order to verify the absentee ballot was voted by the elector who requested the ballot, who requested the ballot. You have to request an absentee ballot. That's the only fair way. Fam has brought up before. We've talked about it before. There's a reason why in other countries they've eliminated mail-in ballots, because there's so many rooms for fraud. Jimmy Carter said the easiest way for fraud is through the mail-in ballot system. He's then retracted because he had TDS, but it is the truth. There's an avenue for fraud. They used to dub it back in the days the secret ballot from the Boss Tweed days, because you don't know where it's coming from. In order to verify the absentee ballot was voted by the elector who requested the ballot, the elector shall print the number of his or her Georgia driver's license number or identification card, the law states, referring to voter as elector, and adding, the elector shall then print his or her date of birth in the space provided in the outer oath envelope. Okay. The law goes on to state, if the elector does not have a Georgia's driver's license or state identification card issued pursuant to Article 5 of Chapter 5 of Title 40, the elector shall so affirm in the space provided on the outer oath envelope and print the last four digits of his or her Social Security number in the space provided on the outer oath envelope. So in other words, if you don't have an ID, you put your last four of your Social Security numbers and matches up with your date of birth. Azalut, you get to vote. I mean, is that really barbaric? Is that being racist and telling people that they can't vote by doing that? I mean, in Venezuela, you got to put your thumbprint down. There is no mail-in voting.
Right.
I mean, ladies and gentlemen, what do we do for some security over here? And immediately the progressives take the bait and go, and that's racist. That's racist.
They don't know anything about the specifics or the nuances. And like I said, they start calling people saying, wait a minute, this is it. You're getting the wrong information here. Let's give you all the facts. And then you can decide if you feel like this is racist or not.
Yeah.
So,
Johnny, you got it there in the bill? All right. So he just showed you right there. It's in the bill. There you go. That is not fucking hard. You can sign up online to the Secretary of State's website. So what they're trying to do is provide actual securities to make sure that people have the right to vote, can vote, and there's not extra ballots out there. When you didn't have to put any driver's license number, no identification number, all it was a signature. Then they took away the signature verification.
Right.
I mean, these ballots were coming in from where? From where? There was no chain of custody. Forget about it. It was a free-for-all, and a lot of people still want to ignore that and just go on and say the Republicans are being racist. No, they're not. Not here, not in this sense. So a crime to provide water. Now this is the next one, number 2 here. This is a fun one, fam, because we witnessed this perfectly.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it really quick. Georgia law prohibits campaign workers from distributing food or drink or anything else of value to waiting voters from setting up a table within 150 feet of the building or 25 feet of a voter. The most prominent talking point to emerge from Biden and other Democrats has been regarding water bottles. Can you imagine? This is Jim Crow on steroids. You can't give water to somebody online?
Right.
It makes it a crime to provide water to voters while they wait in lines? Come on. Lines of Republican officials themselves have created by reducing the number of polling sites across the state disproportionately in black neighborhoods, Biden said of the new law in his formal statement. This is false because the law specifically allows official poll workers as opposed to campaign workers to provide water to voters. True story, ladies and gentlemen. It was AB 51 or AB 54. It was the assembly votes for the whatever you call them,
The delegates?
The delegates.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and we go and we were covered for that day. We were down in Orange County where we witnessed Katie Porter working the lines with an orange shirt. And
with her slate.
And their slate, the people that her slate that she was promoting to get these positions were wearing the same shirt.
Right.
So
and
now she's in line shaking everybody's hands, and you can see who else is with her, whatnot, like that, and she's working the line. She's
Katie Porter, Congresswoman.
Yes.
Katie Porter is now a congresswoman. Then she wasn't. Or she had just won her election.
She just won her election.
She was given. She was had little flyers in her hand, and she was wearing her slate shirt. Now the delegate thing is important because the delegates vote on the just the legislation and the money and on candidates to endorse.
It's a Democratic Party thing.
Yes.
Yeah, in California. It's a California Democratic Party thing.
You pick 7 men, you pick 7 women, and those are your, you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
It was supposed to be not legal for people to hand out stuff, but she was out there, and there was, when we got there, the slate people were giving people, what were they giving them? Cupcakes, donuts.
Yeah.
They, literally.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
If you look at this bill, and you compare it to what we experienced, this eliminates that, because what does that do? These people come in and they say, hey, we're going to take everybody out to breakfast or lunch. Come in there.
Yes.
And they
we have
do
to tell
this.
That story.
And and what does that do? If you vote for us, we'll give you a free lunch. That happens all the time here in California. Buses driven in with people.
We saw a bus
That's another
come
part
in.
of it.
Yes.
Buses.
We went to another place, right? And a bus drew up, okay? And a bunch of people jumped on the bus and said, look at this, what's going on? Well, somebody had talked to a lot of people on the bus, and what they did was they grabbed a Democratic member. Remember to get your friend on Saturday. We're going to pick you up, and we're going to take everybody for coffee and bagels or coffee and donuts, and then we're going to go over and you're going to let you vote and do your Democratic duty, okay? But what they do is they put everybody on the bus. They give them pamphlets on who to vote for in the slates.
Yep.
In the Jimmy Gomez slate, I believe it was, right, at that particular location, whatnot.
There was Jimmy Gomez and Wendy Carrillo.
Yeah. And the bus picks up people, and they go for coffee, and they go for donuts, and then they come back, and they vote for the people that they were bribed to vote for. That is what this is preventing, ladies and gentlemen. That is what this is stopping, okay? They were bribing people. So if you say campaign workers can't give out food or water, that's okay. That's stopping people. But if you say that poll workers can do it, nobody's going to die. They've really twisted this thing all so badly. They've really twisted this thing so badly. And I remember that day that Katie Porter didn't want to talk about Venezuela.
No, she didn't. Johnny's going to pull it up in a minute. And so just to reiterate, you guys, poll workers can give you water. Poll workers and other people can give you pizza. You can still receive it from people. Who can't do that are people involved in the election process.
Campaign workers.
Because that's not okay, because it would be a perhaps like you could be giving them information to vote for a certain candidate. That's always been the case, to separate the campaign worker from the actual people. So let's watch a little bit of what we had.
Oh, there's our orange shirts.
So there's this lady with Johnny, you just show it.
In DC.
We
over the last 26 months, I've.
So someone said you guys are working
But you
on
can see
honor
what happened,
system
ladies
today.
and
Is that what's going on? You guys are checking IDs, or you guys
No ID checking today. Everyone can vote. That's it. Nothing. Nobody's getting checked.
They'll get checked. There's a random checking of votes.
A random checking. How many people get checked?
I don't know. I don't think it's done here.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
It's all part of the Democratic plan to play on your emotions. Always.
There's literally no
Always.
security.
Zero. Anybody can come in. They were busting people in. It's just.
And so Katie Porter was there. Pasta got to ask her questions, and then because we were trying to ask her hey, should you be there? Should you be, having all this information with your shirt of your slate with people there, and basically encouraging them to vote for her slate. And that is illegal. That is a breach. And that's why I was always suspect of Katie Porter. She's really great when she talks against Republicans, but come on. She was like an Elizabeth Warren type of Democrat. And this was one of the first instances where we were like, okay, there's zero security in this. Yes, it is a local, assembly, a delegate election. But if it's like this here, how do you think it is on a state level, on a bigger state level, on a federal level, right?
Yeah. Specifically, the law says no person shall solicit votes in any manner by any means or method, nor shall any person distribute or display any campaign material, which she was doing,
right.
Nor shall any person give or offer to give or participate in the giving of any money, gifts included, but not limited to food and drink to an elector, nor shall any person solicit signatures for any petition, nor shall any person other than the election officials discharging their duties establish or set up any tables or booths on any day in which ballots are being cast within 150 feet of the outer edge of any building within a polling place is established. Okay,
that's fair.
That's fair.
That should be no brainer. You shouldn't have people there influencing other people to vote. And that's what the establishment Democrats have always done. They have specifically done it here against progressives, against actual leftist candidates running in city council, in assembly district. And they literally have always done that. And they bus people over too. They bus people.
They had to redo that election, right?
They had to redo that election.
Because they got caught with that bus.
It's crazy. This is
took
what
them for breakfast.
They give people food.
They bribed them.
They bribe people with food. I mean, a lot of pasta loves food. I mean, you bribe them with pasta. That's it.
I'll give me some coffee and donuts. I'll vote for whoever you want on the slate. I don't give a shit. All right, yeah. What do I get? Do I get 2 donuts? All right, are they vegan donuts? Give me them. Where you got it?
Seriously.
But that's what they were doing. They were telling people, grab your friend. Older people, grab your friend. And in these things, a lot of people go, oh, well, it's not going to make a difference. But in these particular votes right over here, 10 votes meant a lot. 5 votes meant a lot. You know what I'm saying? This was for picking delegates within the group. And now you have people like Jimmy Gomez who have a lot of money and power that can buy a bus. And what do the progressives say? Well, they're helping old people go and vote. You're not allowed to do that. Maria Estrada wrote rules. She said after this whole debacle, one of the rules were that no campaign staffer is allowed to bribe any elector with food or beverage.
And Maria is a progressive Latina, a Mexican woman that is doing this. Is she against people of color? No, she consistently speaks on behalf of her community and tries to be on behalf of people of color, putting the same type of rule in order to stop this. It's the same thing. This is just at a bigger, a bigger level than, and it actually goes down to affect everything. It's going to affect the Georgia delegates. It's going to affect any sort of election that goes on in Georgia. Yeah. We need this actually at a federal level. We need to make sure that this does not happen at all, because it is a way to influence and manipulate elections, no matter which side you're on. Yeah. I don't care if a Republican does it. I don't care if a Democrat does it. It shouldn't happen. I don't care if a Green Party member does it. It's wrong. Yeah. We shouldn't be able to manipulate elections via bribing. It's I remember, though, this starts early on in school, because if you run for student council, it was always the person who bribed the most, who gave people the most. Ooh, cookies.
I did that shit.
Exactly.
I did that shit when I first got here.
This is okay. It's not. It's not.
I brought cupcakes when I first got to Hollywood. I wanted to get extra work because I was desperate to get a job and stuff. So I brought ganache chocolate cupcakes to the guys who ran the extras kind of agency, and they got me work all the time and stuff like that. But, and a lot of people were like, man, he was smart. I'm like, yeah, I was smart. But in elections, that's unfair.
Right.
The law goes on to state the code. This code section shall not be construed to prohibit a poll officer from distributing materials as required by law which are necessary for the purpose of instructing electors, or from distributing materials prepared by the Secretary of State which are designed solely for the purpose of encouraging voter participation in the election being conducted, or form of making available self-service water from an unattended receptacle to an elector waiting in line to vote. So Joe Biden was lying.
They all were lying, not just Joe Biden,
Can
but
you
every
believe it
single
makes it illegal to bring
Democrat.
somebody water? No, poll workers, they have water there.
Yeah, like if it's hot in a line. First of all, also, how about we work on not having long lines?
Well, that's another thing too and stuff. But
How
Johnny,
about we work on that?
Johnny, we went to a lot of poll places and stuff. You've seen how it was, and there was plenty of
it was
water and a lot.
terrible.
I mean, it was just awful. The lines. We went around beforehand and whatnot and stuff. Poll workers have water. Poll workers can give water. Somebody can order pizza to a line. You know what I'm saying?
It's just the campaign, the election workers
Yeah.
cannot do that.
The campaign workers can.
The-
If you're representing a campaign, you can't solicit
Right.
food to get votes. And we've seen it with our own eyes. They had to redo that election because that bus was there. Somebody we know jumped on that bus. She eventually got smacked from one of Gomez's goons and stuff like that.
No, it was Wendy Carrillo's goons.
It was Wendy Carrillo. Was it the same thing? A little bit different goon.
But they're both goons.
But once again, she got, you know what I'm saying, she literally got smacked for this shit, but she jumped on the bus. Was like, look at this shit. Look at this shit. And like I said, Maria Estrada wrote those rules, and we put that in there because they had talked to some people. The bus picked up a bunch of people and their friends, took them for coffee and donuts.
Right, and it's a lot of the times it's older people too, like the elderly, and that they always try to rig it with the elderly. I know Debbie Wasserman Schultz, that's what she was doing.
Oh my God!
These are the things they do. They go to these what is it, the homes for the elderly, and they go and they like give them their pamphlets. They give them
the pamphlets. Here you
I
go.
was
Vote for these
told
people, fam.
To do that, like if I ran for delegate, go.
unfair.
This is a great place to do it, and there's a way to do it where you can go and say, "Hi, I'm doing this and that." But if you're literally taking people there and bringing them all for breakfast and then being like, "Here, I gave you breakfast, vote for me."
That's what they did. And here it says a practice known as the line warming loophole, in which a campaign operatives provide giveaways to voters while they stand in line. It is not a new controversy. We saw it ourselves. We were like, "Well, what are you doing in line?" "Well, I'm a citizen of this area, first of all."
Yeah.
It's like, but and it was a young pasta. It was before I was ready to rock and roll and stuff. If I saw online now today, and I immediately went to Venezuela because I wanted to get her on Venezuela, I should have got her on the election thing right there and said, "Well, don't you think this is kind of like illegal and stuff like that?
Yeah.
That you're warming the line over here? You're wearing the same shirt as people on your slate."
We still
They're giving
mentioned
away
it. We
cupcakes.
thought of it, but we were like, okay, we were focused.
This is not new. This is not new, ladies and gentlemen, and they should stop this shit.
Yeah.
You can't go out there and bribe people for votes. Can you imagine not giving water? Come on, man. This is Jim Crow on steroids.
Guys, that is a lie. I want to make sure you understand they are literally lying about that. That is their main talking point, and they are absolutely 100% gaslighting everybody and lying about it. Okay, this should be like breaking news for everybody. And it's now, and people who are talking about it, the only person I've seen talking about it on the left has been Glenn Greenwald, and he's being called a fascist, a this and that, like, and so we're going to be called that too.
Ben Swan will be
Ben
talking
Swan,
about it.
I'm sure, has talked about it.
Because he understands. Ben Swan knows these things in and out too as well. He understands elections and stuff like that.
He does.
And that's the whole thing is that when you're an election integrity activist, you have to be nonpartisan. Okay, you have to be nonpartisan. You have to think about, okay, what's the best? You have to weigh the accessibility with the security in the chain of custody. If one is way out of whack, you can't do that. You know what I mean? I think Glenn Greenwald made a statement. He said that anytime you add restrictions or protections or something to increase the security of elections, some people are going to be left out, whatnot, and the other side is going to use that to their advantage in saying they're being racist, they're suppressing the vote and stuff like that. This whole argument, they want to leave the mechanisms in play for them to cheat. That's what they want.
It also keeps the whole duopoly thing going, right?
It does. It does.
Democrats are better for people of color. No, they're not.
Okay. So now, once again, here Biden kept on lying, too. It said it ends, number 3, it ends early voting hours. Early, right? In his written statement Friday, Biden said among the outrageous parts of the new state law is it ends voting hours early so working people can't cast their vote after their shift is over. This assertion about voting hours is false. The new Georgia law states, does nothing to change the election day voting hours from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., although it expands weekend voting before the election day. In other words, they've added on actually extra days, extra Saturdays and Sundays. The law adds early voting on 2 Saturdays and 1 Sunday that is previously were not available to Georgians. So they've actually added days, whatnot, and stuff like that. And they're trying to say that on the Saturdays and Sundays when they close down at 5, it's unjust. Well, it's a Saturday and it's a fucking Sunday. Sorry, bro. Requiring 2 Saturday, the law itself states requiring 2 Saturday voting days and an optional Sunday voting days will dramatically increase the total voting hours for voters across the state of Georgia. And all electors in Georgia will have access to multiple opportunities to vote in person on the weekend for the first time. Fam, why is it the fact that when Democrats say, like, we're doing these vote centers, which I hate, I want to go back to the precincts because I want to know where exactly a person has to vote and how they have to vote and stuff, so we have more tracking and understanding and stuff like that. Why is it okay for Democrats to say this shit? Well, we're opening up all these vote centers so they have more time for voting and whatnot, and then they shorten all the voting centers, whatnot, and they lie to you. Now they're trying to use their same sins against the Republicans when it's actually false.
Yeah, I mean, this is like a bipartisan trick. I mean, both sides cheat, right? Both sides cheat, and it depends on what is convenient. This law is going to make it difficult for either side to cheat, for both Republicans and Democrats, actually. But it is being misconstrued purposely on mainstream media as actually hurting people of color when it's actually just providing more security for the elections.
Yeah. It's making it harder to cheat, not harder to vote. Number 4, this one I fucking love right here because I talk about this all the time. I've talked about the Amistad Project in Chicago, Phil Klein, whatnot. Whether you like him or not, he is a conservative, but he brings up an interesting point. According to the Constitution, everybody has to have the equal right when it comes to voting, right? So when you take drop boxes that are pretty much funded by Mark Zuckerberg and you put them in a heavily dense Democratic area, but then you don't spread them out in a Republican area, that is unconstitutional. It's voter suppression of Republicans. You know what I'm saying? I'm so sorry, but that's what it's doing.
Fair is fair, guys.
Fair is fair, and that's what it is. When you are an election integrity activist, you have to be nonpartisan, and you have to make sure this is right. So it says render drop boxes useless. Abrams Fair Fight Action Organization said the law, known as Senate Bill 202, would render drop boxes useless and otherwise harm voters across the state. The New York Times in March 30th story referred to the legislation as the GOP-backed bill that prohibits the use of drop boxes. The law actually codifies the use of drop boxes. Election officials provided drop boxes for ballots in the presidential election in Georgia based on Kemp's emergency order to address voting concerns during the COVID-19 pandemic. In other words, COVID-19 was out there. There was a pandemic. Let's get them out there. Let's put them out there, whatever. But for SB 202, drop boxes will not have to be used in any future Georgia election. That said, fewer drop boxes will be available in future elections, presumably operating under the absence of a pandemic than the 2020 elections. Each county in Georgia must provide at least one drop boxes, but boxes will have to be located near early voting sites and accessible for dropping off absentee ballots when these polling locations are open. Now, I'm going to say this right now before I read to the law states. I hate drop boxes because there's no chain of custody. You don't know what goes in there. You know who can go there. There's no film watching it. Anybody can do anything at any time. A nefarious player can come by and put thousands of ballots in there and nothing is ever seen. You don't know who's picking these things up. It's not like when people go, well, what's the difference between somebody picking them up for a campaign or a county clerk than a mailman picking up? Well, when a mailman picks up, you know what mailman picked it up. You know what time he picked it up. It's all in the chain of custody. It's a federal worker actually keeping track of the ballot. So it's a stupid comment. I don't want to say stupid guy. It's not a right comment when you say, well, there's no difference. There's a huge difference because you know exactly who and when and where, which mailman went to that mailbox at what time and when it's transported back. If you have a tracking and you go to somebody's house, they hit it with their gun, you know, it's picked up from this house and when it's dropped off.
Once again, we can track our Uber Eats. We can track your whatever, your anything you order like that online. You can track your mail, but you can't track your ballot.
Yes.
And that is something that needs to be worked on. If you want more drop boxes, you need to strengthen the chain of custody and know specifically what's going on in the transportation system, where these things are being transferred, from one area to another. Jonny, of course, has done extensive on the ground work when it comes to the chain of custody in Los Angeles, and there is no transparency. There's like tons and tons of ballots just everywhere. You don't know who's taking it where. We saw it with also when we were in Florida, in South Florida, in Debbie Wasserman Schultz's district, like trucks moving one set of ballots, mail-in ballots to another. It's crazy. Just in ballots in general, there is no chain of custody. Less so when it comes to drop boxes.
I would eliminate them completely. completely. That's my idea. I would add tracking and have if you want to put them in a mailbox, that's cool. I'm good with that. With a federal worker, certified mail, you know where it's coming.
I wouldn't
you know
eliminate them, but I would make it so one specific entity like the Postal Service picks it up, and that there is a tracking number in it. Because I understand that sometimes it's easier, especially in certain rural areas, etc. So because that does affect poor people, like not having access affects poor people, but you have to put in, of course, a chain of custody.
You have to be fair. And the law states a board of registrars or absentee ballot clerk shall establish at least one drop box as a mean for absentee ballots by mail electors to deliver their ballots to the board of registrars or absentee ballot clerk. A board of registrars or absentee ballot clerk may establish additional drop boxes subject to the limitations of the code of this section, but may only establish additional drop boxes totaling the lesser of either one drop box for every 100,000 active registered voters in the county or the number of advancing voting locations in the county. Any additional drop boxes shall be evenly geographically distributed by the population in the county.
Why is that?
That last sentence is so important because, once again, we talked about it. Phil Klein said this when he was testifying at the Wisconsin hearings. He says, for every 2 square miles in a Democratic area, there was a drop box. For a Republican area, it was like, take your family and go find Where's Waldo. They weren't around. They were non-existent. So they flooded the Democratic areas, the areas they didn't get those votes from, with drop boxes and make sure they weren't available for the people in the other areas. And once again, if there's no chain of custody, I ain't down with it. If there's no camera on that drop box, I ain't down with it. Anybody can put anything in that thing at any single time, fam. I don't like it. And with ballot harvesting, it gets really bad.
Yeah.
I'm just going to skip the next part, which says Jim Crow 2.0, because I don't even want to kind of get into this whole argument about this thing right now. It's not the new Jim Crow.
No, we just told you how it's not the Jim.
Yeah, I'm not even getting into this stupid fucking argument right now. It is dumb. Number 6, the legislative takeover. Now, fam, this is important too, and I believe some of the stuff you put in the folder talks about this, right? What they pretty much done, ladies and gentlemen, is that they've taken away the Secretary of State or certain registrars as being the head of the election board. And what they've done is they've kicked it to the legislative body to appoint somebody. Okay, and that person who they appoint cannot be a candidate, cannot be an elected official. It has to be a nonpartisan person that they elect, and there's more oversight that way. This opens the door for more audits, more looking at stuff going on, taking a look at the ballot images. They took away one of the biggest changes in the law that gives the GOP-controlled legislature more control over the election administration, that has raised alarms about the potential greater partisan influence. The fact is that under the new law, the state legislature does indeed have an increased role in the state election board under the new law. Meanwhile, Georgia's Secretary of State will have a diminished role. This is on the basis for the claim that the partisan politics could play a role. The Secretary of State will no longer chair the election board, becoming the Secretary of State will no longer chair the state election board, becoming instead a non-voting ex officio member. Georgia Public Broadcasting explained the new chair would be nonpartisan, but appointed by a majority of the state House and Senate. Look at the next line. The chair would not be allowed to have been a candidate. Right? Fam, a little hard with the Secretary of State when you got Alex Padilla, who's actually
actively campaigning Hillary Clinton, and completely involved in the election process. That was a conflict of interest that should have never been allowed.
And it also says the chair would not be allowed to have been a candidate, participate in a political party organization or campaign, or have made campaign contributions for 2 years prior to being appointed.
Sorry,
how
Alex
is that
Padilla.
not better?
That is so much better, because Alex Padilla is a corrupt mother effer who has continuously worked against progressives, and his new laws and his involvement with the elections here have worked against progressives.
Okay, and that's the thing. Look at he can't be a candidate. He can't be a voter. He couldn't be a candidate. He couldn't hold office. He couldn't have made any campaign contributions 2 years prior. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, how is that not? And here's how they spin it. Now the Republican Party is trying to give themselves more control, fam. They're trying to take all the control. They're trying to give it to the legislative body so the Republicans can control it. No. They're trying to make it more fair. You had these secretaries of states who were Democrats in these areas illegally changing laws, illegally going out there and shilling and standing for establishment candidates, like she said, Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden. Both the Secretary of State in this state, both times, was for the establishment Democrat. How is that fair if they're going to oversee the election, you donkeys?
Against Bernie Sanders, too. Against every progressive candidate.
Lord.
We've seen this happen time and time again. So those people that say that Democrats don't cheat, they do cheat, and they cheat big time. Both parties cheat. So
the establishment cheats.
Exactly. Let's just go over this real quick. We kind of gone over a lot of this. This is just a summary of what the bill is. It's to provide for the establishment of voter intimidation and illegal election activities hotline, to limit the ability of the state election board and the Secretary of State to enter into certain consent agreements, settlements, and consent orders, to provide that the Secretary of State shall be a non-voting ex officio member. You just mentioned that. And then they go on to talk about to require the Secretary of State to support and assist the state election board, to provide the appointment of a temporary and permanent replacement superintendents, to provide for procedures, a performance review of local election officials requested by the state election board or local governing authorities. That is important. To provide for a definition, to provide for appointment of duties and performance review boards, etc. Okay, so
they're just putting in more securities and more transparency into who they're electing. Who they're putting in charge. Go ahead.
Then to provide for the compensation of such acting election superintendents, to provide for the reduction in size of certain precincts under certain circumstances, to provide for
22.
notice when polling places are relocated, to provide for certain reports, to provide limitations on the use of buses and other movable facilities.
Down a little bit, Johnny. Number 22. Sorry.
Yeah,
so
sorry.
You can show the audience again.
Yeah, so again, to provide limitations on the use of buses and other movable facilities. Okay, that is extremely important because, like we said before, using buses to bring in people and have them vote a certain way should be illegal.
Yeah.
And that is not, that should not be allowed. They do this all the time.
The Democratic Party has a history of doing this, of busing people in the establishment to crush their progressive candidates. As progressives, we're trying to try to help, you know what I'm saying? That's the main thing, ladies and gentlemen. The sad thing about this whole election thing is you now have progressives fighting for establishment tactics. Meanwhile, the same tactics that were used to crush your progressive candidates are now being used against whoever is trying to run against them, and you're buying into it. You're buying into it, and it affects you the most. They have a history of busing people in. This is actually the establishment candidates who can afford to get a bus and a bus driver and say, round up some people, bring them in, we need to get some votes. They do this shit all the time. They have to stop doing this. Does that mean that we can't, if we want to help
Johnny, wait,
get
don't
people, number 30, by the way, Johnny, does that mean that we can't help people get to the polls, that we need help get to the polls?
Yeah.
Of course, but the campaigns can't be doing this. It's illegal.
Exactly. And so 31, actually, to provide for the printing of ballots on safety paper, to provide for the time and manner of applying for absentee ballots, to provide for certain limitations and sanctions on the distribution of absentee ballot applications, to provide for the manner of processing absentee ballot applications, to provide for absentee ballot drop boxes and requirements, to provide the time and manner of issue of absentee ballots again, to provide for the manner of voting and returning absentee ballots, to revise the time for advanced voting. So this is just giving you the general overall. Then they later at 38, to provide for the processing and tabulation of absentee ballots, to provide for sanctions for improperly opening an absentee ballot, to provide for certain elector identification for absentee ballot, to provide for monitors and observers, poll watcher training, etc., in the process of provisional ballots, and to provide for duplication panels 44 for defective ballots that cannot be processed by tabulation machines, to provide for ranked choice voting for military and overseas voters. Yeah, it's not a bad bill. It's not perfect. There are a lot of things it does not do. It doesn't talk about black box voting. It doesn't talk about the proprietary software. But this is actually an attempt to make this a little bit less likely for institutional cheating for election fraud.
And number 47?
To provide for a pilot program for the scanning and publishing of ballots.
Hello?
This is what we've been talking about.
This is John Brakey here.
Right.
The ballots, voting is a private right. Counting is a public right. You know what I'm saying? So once again, providing in the publishing of the scanning, right? We've been talking about this. This is something that needs to be done online. Here it goes. You secure the person's name and what they did and stuff like that, and you just provide the publishing of these ballots. They belong to us, the people. They're actually providing more oversight and necessary oversight. That's something that's not getting done that we talk about all the time.
50, to provide for public notice and observation or preparation of voting equipment, to provide for the observation of elections and ballot processing and counting. That is important. We need to be able to observe this.
Yes.
To provide for the filling of vacancies in certain office, to prohibit observing or attempting to observe how a voter marks or has marked his or her ballot, or inducing a voter to do so, to prohibit the acceptance of a ballot for return without authorization. Things that the Democratic Party has done in this past election that we have seen them do against progressives. Etc. And then if you go down to from 70 on, it just basically talks about why they're doing it from 2008 to 2020 elections. Yep. There's a lack of confidence in the Georgia election system, with many electors concerned about allegations of rampant voter suppression and many electors concerned about allegations of rampant voter fraud. They should change that to election fraud. Yeah. Many Georgia election processes were challenged in court. The stress of the 2020 elections with dramatic increase in absentee by mail ballots and pandemic restrictions demonstrated where there were opportunities to update existing processes to reduce the burden of election officials and boost voter confidence. The changes made in this legislation are designed to address lack of elector confidence in the election system on all sides of the political spectrum, to reduce the burden of election officials, and to streamline the process of conducting elections in Georgia by promoting uniformity in voting. And basically, we've talked about a lot of this. And
well, they gave you the why in this whole thing like that. You know what I'm saying? It's been really spun by the Democratic Party, really trying to change the whole reasons why they're doing this. They got away with a lot of things, and a lot of unjust things were done. As election integrity activists, we were seeing like people being thrown out of the room and saying, that's not right. You cannot do that. You need to have these ballots that have absentee signatures need to be properly scrutinized. And the fact that they even shotgunned these ballots out, they illegally changed laws. They didn't change these laws properly. They used the COVID as a weapon to tilt the mechanisms in their favor by eliminating identification numbers on absentee ballots, by not even checking signatures, whatnot. So a lot of state legislations are taking things into their own hands. Now, we were concerned that by doing so, are they going to overthrust a lot in this like that and shut a lot of people out? I don't think so. They have shut some people out. Stacey Abrams says close to 200,000 people don't have the identification. Governor Kemp says 160,000 people don't have the identification. But they've provided avenues where you can get the proper needs to get an absentee ballot. And in every step of the way, if you want an absentee ballot, you need to request one. They can't just shotgun everybody's name out on the voter registration rolls and send them out, fam. It's going to be unfair.
And if you go down to 101, Johnny, they talk about how elections are a public process and public participation is encouraged by all involved, but the enthusiasm of some outside groups in sending multiple absentee ballot applications in 2020, often with incorrectly filled in voter information, led to significant confusion by electors. Clarifying the rules and regarding absentee ballot applications will build elector confidence while not sacrificing the opportunities for electors to participate in the process. The lengthy absentee ballot process also led to elector confusion, including electors who were told they had already voted when they arrived to vote in person. That happened to multiple people. Creating a definite period of absentee voting will assist electors in understanding the election process while ensuring that opportunities to vote are not diminished. Especially when many absentee ballots issued the last few days before the election were not successfully voted or were returned late. Opportunities for delivering absentee ballots to a drop box were created by the state election board as a pandemic response. We already talked about that. The 9-week runoffs were exhausting for candidates, donors, and electors. By adding ranked choice voting for military and overseas voters, the runoff period can be shortened to a more manageable period for all involved. Ease the burden of election electors.
Republicans actually adding
ranked choice voting. Guys, the Republicans are adding ranked choice voting. Can you?
It's a racist bill, fam.
This is why you have to read the fucking text. This is why you cannot rely on mainstream media and politicians and people like Stacey Abrams to give you something, because they're spending tons and tons of money to speak out against this, because it it's a better bill than what we have right now. And of course, they're talking about the county of absentee ballots, 122. That took forever. And it was really, it was just not like fair. The sanctity of the precinct was also brought into sharp focus in 2020, with many groups approaching electors while they waited in line. 126. Protecting electors from improper interference, political pressure, or intimidation while waiting in line to vote is of paramount importance to protecting the election system and ensuring elector confidence. 129. Ballot duplication for provisional ballots and other purposes places a heavy burden on election officials. The number of duplicated ballots has continued to rise dramatically from 2016 through 2020. Gee, those 4 years, I wonder what was happening in those 4 years. I don't know. Some Democratic socialists ran. Reducing the number of duplicated ballots will significantly reduce the burden of an election official and create bipartisan panels to conduct duplication will promote elector confidence. This is like more of what we need. Okay. And then I think the last couple of ones, section 181. And this kind of talks about the State Board of Election Board. This is important. This is important. There is created a state board to be known as the State Election Board to be composed no longer. You see that it's crossed out of a chairperson elected by the General Assembly, an elector to be elected by a majority vote of the Senate and General Assembly, the state Senate, of course, at its regular session held in each odd number year, an elector to be elected by a majority vote of the House and Representatives of the General Assembly at its regular session held in each odd number year, and a member of each political party to be nominated and appointed in a manner provided in this code section. No person, while a member of the General Assembly, shall serve as a member of that board. The chairperson shall be elected by the General Assembly. A joint resolution which shall fix a definite time for the nomination and election of the chairperson may be introduced in either branch of the General Assembly. And we talked about this already, the Speaker of the House,
they say,
etc.
Oh, from both parties, they said, right, too, as well. Can't be a candidate, go ahead, Johnny, I'm sorry.
Well, there it says a member of each political party.
Exactly.
So not just Democrats and Republicans.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. So technically, if you
this will be interesting to see if they follow through.
I wish they would do that here. I'd run for this position. I won't donate anything for 2 years. And I want to run for this position as an independent. Literally, let me get. I would love to run for this position.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's what they need. They can't leave it to the Secretary of State, an establishment guy. Come on.
100%. And then further down on 204, the chairperson of the board shall be nonpartisan. At no time during his or her service as a chairperson shall the chairperson actively participate in a political party organization, etc. So we've talked about this already. Guys, that is like, this is good. This is actually, it's more good.
Bill.
It's more good than bad.
Yes.
So while, again, some maybe 160,000, 200,000 people might be left out, we have time now to work on making sure those people have what they need. More states should actually replicate this law, and we're going to get a lot of flack for it because nobody's telling you the truth on this.
Nope.
But the reason is because we know about elections.
Yep.
We know the language. We look at the documents. You're not going to get most of this from anybody on the left, save the two people we mentioned. And this is important because this is why we do what we do, because they're weaponizing this to continue to divide people up and continue to pit people against each other, which brings us to our next subject. But I just want to say it's so important that we fight back the lies that have been spewed by the establishment to further divide people, to play team party sports. I don't play team sports,
I don't play team sports.
It's crazy that they're lying so blatantly about this.
Well, as election integrity activists, I think we have to point out a few things which the bill lacks. And we have to get to the crux of it. It's almost like cryptocurrency. It's a great answer, but it's not the final answer. Right. We have to get to the black box voting, which is the proprietary software, the tabulation machines. We have to have mandatory audits. I like the fact that the bill does point out that the ballot images are for public consumption, to get them out there, to put them out there for broadcasting. They should be. Right, you know what I'm saying? They should be out there for everybody to see. Hide the person's name, protect the person's identity and stuff like that. But the actual votes itself should be out there for the public to see, for fair counting, to make sure there's no fugaziness. It doesn't talk about tracking on ballots, which is a big thing that we really can do. It doesn't talk about the contracts on who makes these ballots and what happens to these ballots when they don't hit a person and they get sent back into the abyss. That's why we have so many loose ballots out there. A lot of people go, well, how are you going to hold these ballots? Well, if there are 10 million people on the voting rolls and only 9 million people get the ballots, where's that other million ballots go? And with no identification needed on these absentee ballots this last election, they can just be filled out by anybody. You don't even need a good signature nowadays. And they can get turned in and counted for a certain person like Joe Biden.
Right. So, 100%.
Because what Whitney Webb said with the signature machines.
Verification.
What was it? The signature verification?
Parasite was one of the companies and stuff like that. They would lower the tethrance layer. In other words, the credibility thing. In other words, Periscript. And it was, I think they said it was on 8. Like that was the number that was supposed to be set on by the legislation. No. They lowered it down to 3. In other words, a squibble can get through.
Right.
No, so this is really interesting. The fact that they got rid of the Secretary of State, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
That's a huge deal.
Yeah.
That's really better than California, absolutely, because We know with
Wanna move
Alex
to Georgia?
Padilla here, Secretary of State of
Moving to
California,
Georgia.
Alex Padilla,
Yeah.
currently election fraud lawsuits held against him. Raji Rab. The other thing I want to see is that both of them, here in the bill and the Democrats, they talk about the waters, right? The water, but they don't talk about why the line is so long, right?
Right.
Why is the line so long?
Right.
That's too. Yeah.
So that's something that
It's
everyone's
lacking,
like ignoring there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we that's a great point, Johnny. There should be something to address the lack of mellifluousness, like that word, which
You're
is
using it
sweet flowing.
wrong.
Mellifluousness.
No, you're using it wrong.
It's mellifluous.
Anyways.
The lines should be mellifluous. They're not.
They should be fluid. Okay.
Well, sweet flowing is what mellifluous is.
No is
Mellifluous means sweet flowing, no?
no. Okay. Anyways,
It's sorry.
what was it? The other thing is the tabulation machines. We need to know what the tabulation machines are.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what I was.
Yeah.
But, going to your point, Johnny, the lines are always jacked up. TYT did a story on this. They break it on purpose, There's nothing to address the training periods and stuff like that. How we get our electorate,
like 2 days
our
of
poll
training.
workers ready to take on a bunch of voting and stuff like that. That is lacking in this bill. There's a lot of things that are lacking in this bill, but to say this bill is about a negative thing from suppressing the vote, it's just a flat out lie. It's a flat out lie. The water thing, they take these little things, they pull them out of context, and they just really gaslight you people. And the fact that a lot of independent media people on the left are parroting the fact that this is a racist bill. by the
Because they
Republicans.
haven't fucking read it. Read the fucking bill. But if you're going to be an independent media person on the left and you're going to start talking the same talking points that the mainstream media is talking about without clearly reading the bill, I'm sorry. I lose a lot of respect. Don't talk about elections then, because elections are wonky. It is a very, it's just a lot of language in there. It's not the sexiest subject. You have to do a lot of like tiresome reading on it. It really is difficult to actually go through all of this. It's like 90 something pages. But the reality is, if you don't, you're going to give people the wrong information. It's so easy. There are so many videos, so many organizations working to make this into a right-wing Jim Crow 2.0 bill, when it actually brings in security for our elections, and we need to do some of this and more.
Yeah.
And
only halfway there.
Yeah, because they didn't talk about the long lines. What we should have more precincts actually with people who are properly trained to do this. More precincts would be better than more ballot drop box areas.
Yeah, and
that's the truth.
And also mandatory audits should be involved.
Yeah.
Right? A mandatory audit should be involved, and not duping the public. Johnny and I, we talked about this too as well. They're not audits, fam. They're logic and accuracy tests half the times, and they feed it to the public that it's an audit. What's going on in Arizona is, really briefly, is that they have their audit. They've decided on their contractors they're going to work with. Unfortunately, not too many leftists are getting in the room for this situation. John Roberts Brakey and Ray Lutz did get shut out. They are still have lawsuits to look at the ballot images. They want to look at the ballot images first because they feel if they touch the ballots before looking at the images without consent to say something wrong is going on here, the feds can come in and seize everything and saying what they're doing is being unjust. That's a fear of theirs. But Javon Hutton Pulitzer was one of the four contractors to get part of the whole this job. And a lot of people have been wanting Javon to be a part of this because he is been selling the fact that he is a ballot authenticator. In other words, he's going to authenticate the ballots, and they're going to look at everything over here. You know what I'm saying? There is a lot of pushback left and right. They're trying to dupe the whole situation, but we're going to see how this is going to play out because the whole world is looking at Arizona right now. I think a lot of the bill in Georgia was taking it away from the Secretary of State. Putting aboard a nonpartisan guy would leave the door open for more proper audits, not logic and accuracy tests, to really check these elections.
Which is why they're fighting.
We didn't
hard
check any of
against
these
it.
things. Yeah, these weren't audits. These were logic and accuracy tests. They were not audits. They got a full forensic audit. So we would be paying close attention to Arizona as it goes on. They said it should take 2 months, fam, 60 days. They've secured a location. They're gonna get all the ballots sent over. But they have to also look at the software too as well. You know what I'm saying? They have to look at all these things. Nobody's really been talking about the software, and that's the saddest part. Our friend Brent Turner would always talk about the software. That is the number one issue. Stalin said, don't give me the power to cast a vote. Give me the power to count the votes, and I'll fucking win every single election. You know what I'm saying? That is where the power lies. If you can count the votes and you have no oversight to count those votes, no checks and balances, you can get away with bloody murder.